he was very, very cautious, very risk averse. Now, though, he definitely seems like an old man in a hurry. He's taking chances that in the past he probably wouldn't. And look, we don't know exactly why, but it may well be that he's hoping to be able to stand down. I mean, he will be 70 in October, and although he can stay in power until his 80s, he may not be enthused about that idea, or indeed exactly, he may well be ill. We do know for sure, because he's basically admitted this, that he is thinking about his place in the history books.
Tell us about the self-drawn parallel then with Peter the Great.
Well, I mean, we should acknowledge, first of all, that Putin does this a lot. He picks what he thinks of as the greats from Russian history and always compares himself to them. And there's clearly a sense in which he is looking for his own place in the pantheon of great Russian heroes. And the Peter the Great one is particularly problematic, not just because Peter the Great was a very, very tall chap and Putin is not, but also because this was immediately interpreted by a whole variety of other countries as evidence of some kind of malign intent to conquer them, because Peter the Great was absolutely a war-fighting czar. He fought a 20-year war with sort of Swedish-led alliance, took various territories in the Baltic states, Finland and elsewhere. But I think it's more, it speaks to Putin's mindset that this is a man who, particularly, as he's getting on, as he might be seriously ill, we don't really know for sure, but is clearly looking for how the history books are going to end up writing about him.
And is it fair to say that his success so far would have been underwhelming for him? And so the plans had to adjust. It's had to shift somewhat as to how he might present a successful war to the Russian people.
Yeah, absolutely. And this is, in some ways, it's a fascinating insight into how the Putin system works. We have a tendency often in the West to assume that he is this sort of brooding mastermind, a grand mastery, three-dimensional geopolitical chess who comes up with the ideas. And in fact, he generally doesn't. He makes it clear that he wants some nice idea and a sort of a broad sense of what he's looking for. And he sits back and he lets all kind of other sort of actors within the Russian political system pitch their ideas. It is the sort of dragon's den model of political management. And one of the particular ideas, which is what I talk about in my article, that is being pitched to him is, look, it's not just enough to annex the conquered territories in Ukraine, which is probably pretty much on the cards. The only question is when they're going to hold a sort of a heavily rigged vote to ensure that. We actually need to be looking much more broadly. And there's a whole variety of little pseudo-states that the Russians are backing across the post-Soviet region, and also Belarus, which is now really becoming dependent on Russia. And this particular sort of notion is saying, look, we need something more. So let's basically snap those up as well and call it some great triumph, some new gathering of the Russian land, so that, you can basically color in more parts of the map. And tell Russians, you see, people are desperate to join Russia and this is what's going on. So we don't know if this is going to happen, but this is certainly one of the strands of thought currently in the Kremlin.
What would the Russian people think about that? And what do we know of that they think of the war at this stage in its entirety?
Well, to start with the war, there have been some opinion polls. It's obviously very difficult to really get a clear sense of what Russians think at the moment. And opinion polls seem to suggest, broadly speaking, just over 50% are in favour of the war. But there's a very, very important caveat to be made there. On the whole, Russians do not know what's going on in Ukraine. The last vestiges of independent media have been squeezed out of the Russian system, and they are being fed a toxic mix of propaganda through television. And they're being told it's a limited operation to stop neo-Nazis carrying out genocide. And, if it's pitched as that, given that they're not being told the level of casualties and so forth, let alone the atrocities that are being done in their name, I think this is why a lot of people are supportive. It's not that they think, yes, let's massacre innocent Ukrainians. So there's support, but it's brittle and it's based on a false idea. The idea, though, of expanding Russia, on one level, I think Russians would like to be told that there are all these other peoples who want to be part of the Russian Federation because they think it's so fab. But on the other hand, these are on the whole rather poorer regions. And therefore, what you're actually talking about is bringing in areas that are going to need to have money spent on them for uplift. let alone sort of leveling up. And I think that's going to be the real issue, because at a time of severe economic problem where inflation is running very, very high, people are worried about their jobs, people are worried about being able to buy food and medicines. The thought of being able to spend money on some region like South Ossetia or Abkhazia in Georgia, just simply so that you can put a little extra dot on the map to say that's Russia's too, I think in the longer term will be very unpopular.
I'm reminded of the Chechen wars and how Putin ploughed money into Grozny. That looks dramatically different, of course, and he can label that as a good case in point. But as you say, the money isn't there now to be able to do that. Are there needs for Putin to accelerate his plan of imperialism, his love of imperialism, because of fears he is unwell?
Well, that could well be the case. I mean, look, now we're wandering into pure speculation, but, well, that's what we're here for. I mean, I think it's certainly what we do see is interesting that there's been a shift in Putin. Once upon a time, or for all his kind of macho theatricals, he was very, very cautious, very risk averse. Now, though, he definitely seems like an old man in a hurry. He's taking chances that in the past he probably wouldn't. And look, we don't know exactly why, but it may well be that he's hoping to be able to stand down. I mean, he will be 70 in October, and although he can stay in power until his 80s, he may not be enthused about that idea, or indeed exactly, he may well be ill. We do know for sure, because he's basically admitted this, that he is thinking about his place in the history books. And if you really want to be one of the great state-building heroes of the Russian pantheon, you're going to have to do rather more than just simply sort of basically burn your way through much of your army for some sort of little bits of Ukraine that probably most people didn't want in the first place.